I moved into Polwood Gardens, a quaint apartment complex in the suburbs of a bustling American city, about 2 years ago. It was a modest, three-story arrangement of units, each with a small balcony or patio, set around a neat courtyard where neighbors sometimes mingled on sunny afternoons. The rent was reasonable, maintenance requests were handled promptly, and it felt like a mini community unto itself. Everyone knew everyone, at least in passing. Part of why Polwood Gardens ran smoothly was its homeowners association, HOA. Though we were technically a condo/apartment hybrid, the complex's managing body functioned like many suburban HOAs. Usually, that meant consistent landscaping, a well-maintained pool, and monthly newsletters reminding us about quiet hours or recycling days. Most people appreciated the stability and order. However, among the well-intentioned board members, there was one official who stood out for her dogmatic intensity. Brenda Farnett, known widely and discreetly as Karen. She was in her late 50s, with impeccably styled hair that hovered somewhere between a bob and a helmet, and her wardrobe consisted of tidy pastels, always pressed, always formal, like she was perpetually preparing for a televised press conference. Her posture was ramrod straight, her voice clipped, and if anything in the building, be it a doormat or the smell wafting from a neighbor's kitchen, didn't align with her notion of the Polwood ideal, she wouldn't hesitate to clamp down on it. When I first encountered Karen, I thought she was merely strict but well-meaning. I remember being startled one Saturday morning when she knocked on my door, complaining about the small pot of basil and mint plants I'd put out on my windowsill. "Please be mindful," she said, "that windowsill decor must be uniform in color." I'd never heard of such a rule, but I quietly agreed to place them elsewhere. Over time, though, I heard from other tenants about far more invasive incidents. Karen scolding someone for letting their kids art hang in a hallway, or demanding that certain holiday wreaths be removed because the colors didn't match the building's neutral palette. She was consistent, if nothing else. Everything had to match her personal sense of order. Still, life went on in Polwood Gardens with a mild sense of tension, overshadowed by Karen's watchful presence. Most residents tried to stay on her good side or avoid her entirely. If you got on her radar, you risked receiving nasty letters citing obscure HOA regulations or threats of fines. The board, in principle, could levy them. Karen's official role was Vice Chair of Resident Relations, an ironic title, given she seemed more adept at sowing fear than fostering relationships. But it was about to get worse, much worse, when Karen decided to meddle in an entirely new domain, the food we cooked in our own apartments. It all started with faint rumors in the building's online forum. People mentioned that Karen was complaining about odors from certain neighbors' kitchens. Some speculated that she had demanded extra deodorizing in the hallways, citing unpleasant scents. Most of us brushed it off. Karen was known for fixating on petty issues. We assumed it would blow over. Little did we know this would escalate into a full-blown culinary crusade, culminating in an unlikely standoff that tested the building's unity and revealed a surprising wealth of cultural richness within our humble complex. One Tuesday evening, after returning from my job as a graphic designer downtown, I found a printed notice taped to my door. The heading read, in bold type, "New Policy Proposal, Avoidance of Strong-Smelling Foods. Dear residents of Polwood Gardens, in an effort to preserve a pleasant ambience for all, we request that residents refrain from cooking overly pungent or strong-smelling dishes. Excessive odors can travel through ventilation and disturb neighbors, undermining the peaceful environment we strive to maintain. Examples of such foods include, but are not limited to, curries, particularly Indian or Thai varieties, strong fish sauces or fermented sauces, commonly used in Southeast Asian cuisine, certain aromatic spices, cumin, garam masala, etc. While we respect culinary preferences, we must also consider the comfort of all. Further guidelines will be discussed at the upcoming HOA meeting. Thank you for your cooperation. Karen Farnett, Vice Chair, Resident Relations, Polwood Gardens, HOA. I stood in the dim hallway, rereading those lines with growing disbelief. The notice basically singled out entire cultures' cuisines: Indian, Thai, Vietnamese, Middle Eastern, even some robust Italian or Mexican cooking might fall under that broad label. I never seen an HOA attempt to legislate what people could or couldn't cook in their private units, let alone blame aromatic spices for nuisance. The mention of curries was especially pointed. I knew for a fact that the Singh family on the third floor cooked Indian dishes regularly. They were well-loved neighbors, always offering share food, and I'd never heard a single complaint about their cooking. Until now. I felt my chest tighten with anger. This was more than mere enforcement of a bylaw. It reeked of xenophobia, or, at the very least, an ignorant bias against certain cuisines. The notice was couched in polite language, but the target was obvious. Cooking with fish sauce or cumin was being labeled as a nuisance. That was an affront to the cultural diversity that actually made Polwood Gardens, and the city at large, vibrant. That night, I hopped onto the building's online message board. My neighbor and friend, Julia, had already started a thread titled, HOA Restricting Cooking. The replies were coming in fast. Marisol, this is insane. My grandma's adobo uses fish sauce sometimes, and it's a family tradition. Anil, we're from India. We can't just stop using our spices. That's literally our daily meals. Are they going to fine us for the smell of turmeric next? Trevor, I get it if someone stinks up the hallway with rotting trash, but cooking? That's personal. Karen is overstepping big time. The common thread was outrage. People who had never been personally targeted by Karen were now alarmed, because this no strong smells policy could affect anyone who enjoyed robust flavors. Even those who seldom used pungent ingredients recognized how arbitrary and offensive the concept was. Food is deeply personal. After all, often a reflection of cultural roots, family heritage, and daily comfort. Within hours, the online forum was ablaze with condemnation. The board's next official meeting was set for the following Monday, and it promised to be heated. If Karen thought she could push this policy through quietly, she'd severely miscalculated. The residents were gearing up for a fight. In the days leading up to the HOA meeting, I decided to talk to some neighbors who might be directly targeted by this policy. While my own cooking sometimes involved stir-fries or spicy dishes, I wasn't as impacted as, say, the Singhs who regularly prepared Indian curries at least a few nights a week. They lived on the third floor, a friendly family of four: Raj, Pooja, their teenage daughter Devika, and young son Mohan. I knocked on their door Friday evening, bringing along a small container of homemade brownies as a friendly gesture. Pooja answered with a warm smile. "Hi, come in," she said, ushering me inside. I smelled something wonderful drifting from their kitchen: ginger, garlic, and cardamom, maybe a bit of chili. The living room was tidy, with a small shrine in a corner, pictures of extended family, and shelves lined with books about Indian culture. As soon as we settled, Pooja offered me a cup of masala chai. I sipped it gratefully, meeting Raj's eye. "So, have you seen Karen's latest notice about strong-smelling foods?" I asked carefully. Raj's expression darkened. "Yes, we did. It was shocking, like a direct attack on our cooking. We've never had a single complaint from neighbors about our meals. We even share our food with the folks next door sometimes." Pooja nodded, her voice trembling slightly with frustration. "We grew up in Mumbai. Spices are in everything we eat. Our kids love dal, biryani, all sorts of curries. That's part of who we are. This notice, it makes us feel unwelcome, as if we're smelly foreigners." She paused, eyes shining with anger. If it were about controlling genuine odors like trash or rotten smells, I'd understand. But telling us not to cook a whole category of foods? It's insulting. I patted her hand in sympathy. That's exactly how many people feel. You're not alone. The building's forum is blowing up with outrage. We're planning to protest at the HOA meeting Monday. I wanted to see if you'd be okay speaking about how it affects you directly. Raj nodded. "We will. I'm not usually one for public conflict, but this is too personal to ignore. We can't let them police what we eat in our own home." After a few more minutes of supportive conversation, I said goodbye. On my way out, I ran into Ching Nguyen, a Vietnamese student who lived down the hall. She'd overheard me talking to the Singhs and expressed similar worry. "I make faux broth sometimes that can smell like star anise and fish sauce. I love it, but I'm paranoid now that Karen will find me. It's ridiculous. I reassured her, we'll fight this. By the time I returned to my apartment, I had a growing sense of determination that we needed to do more than just protest verbally at the meeting. We needed to highlight how diverse and wonderful these cuisines were, to show the board that pungent doesn't mean offensive. I mulled over possible approaches, an idea forming at the back of my mind. Something bold, something that would gather us together in unity rather than letting Karen sow division. That Monday evening, the community room, usually half empty during monthly HOA meetings, was jam-packed. Residents lined the walls, the air charged with tension. At the front of the room sat the 5-person HOA board. The mild-mannered president, Mark, a couple of nondescript members who seldom spoke, and next to them, in a place of prominence, Karen, arms folded, chin lifted like a queen surveying her subjects. Mark called the session to order, glancing nervously at the turnout. After some routine updates about parking rules, we got to the main event. Mark cleared his throat. Now, regarding the recent notice about strong-smelling foods, Karen, you wanted to discuss a new guideline? Karen straightened, flipping open a binder. Yes, thank you, Mark. As many of you know, we've had repeated concerns about strong odors in the corridors. This can be disruptive to neighbors. To ensure harmony, I propose we adopt a policy discouraging the cooking of heavily spiced or pungent dishes. Residents who disregard repeated warnings could face a penalty, similar to noise violations. A wave of shocked mutters rippled across the crowd. But Karen continued, raising her voice. Let me be clear. We respect cultural differences, but we also must respect shared spaces. When an odor penetrates the hallway, that's no longer private. We have had multiple complaints. Here, someone in the crowd interrupted. Who complained? Another voice added, let's see those complaints. We have a right to know. Karen gave a tight smile. They're anonymous. People fear retribution. But trust me, they exist. It was a predictable tactic, citing invisible allies. The tension in the room skyrocketed. Mark tried to maintain order, calling on speakers one by one. Residents lined up to share their perspectives. Some were furious, demanding to see the alleged complaints. Others, like me, pointed out that cooking is a private matter, protected by tenant rights. Raj and Pooja gave a heartfelt testimony about how Indian food was integral to their daily life. Ching Nguyen spoke about how crucial fish sauce was to her Vietnamese meals, how without it, the flavors just weren't authentic. More neighbors chimed in with similar sentiments. Karen maintained her condescending posture, occasionally rolling her eyes or making notes. Eventually, she stood again, addressing the crowd. Look, we're not banning entire cuisines. We're merely asking for courtesy. If your cooking produces odors that invade other space, perhaps you can choose milder spices or ventilate better. We do ventilate, came a yell from the back. Another neighbor shouted, this is just racism disguised as rules. The president hammered the gavel, calling for order. Karen bristled at the accusation, but pressed on, it's not about race. It's about the environment of Pulwood Gardens. Strong smells can be as disturbing as loud music. Her comparison sparked further outrage. By the end of the meeting, the board decided to table the official vote, promising to consult with legal counsel about the feasibility of such a rule. Many suspected Karen was overstepping her authority, but the board was too timid to outright dismiss her proposal. For the moment, the fight was in stalemate. We left that night seething, uncertain if a partial or full ban might materialize. As I trudged home, I realized I needed something to shift the narrative, something that would highlight the value of these pungent foods. A spontaneous idea surfaced. What if we hosted a big cooking showcase in one apartment, inviting the entire board so they could see, smell, and taste the diversity? Show them that strong smelling doesn't equal nuisance, but rather a tapestry of cultural richness. It would be a direct demonstration that these cuisines had more to offer than just an aroma in the hallway. I mulled it over that night, excited by the prospect. If I planned it properly, it could be a powerful statement, and also a chance for neighbors to unite around something positive rather than just raging against Karen's negativity. The next morning, I sent out a group text to some of the outspoken neighbors, Raj and Pooja, Chi, Marisol, plus a few others who'd raised concerns. I outlined my idea, a multicultural cuisine event in my apartment, featuring a potluck of dishes from all our diverse backgrounds, some definitely aromatic and proud of it. Let's prove to the board that these foods are not offensive, but amazing, I wrote. Everyone loved it. Raj suggested we do it on a Saturday evening. Pooja volunteered to cook her signature chana masala. She offered to prepare a batch of faux broth, something typically slow-simmered with star anise and cloves, definitely pungent by Karen's definition. Marisol planned to bring a homemade adobo or mole dish from her grandmother's recipes. I promised to make a Thai green curry, something that had a bit of a kick with lemongrass and chili. Another neighbor, Sam, chimed in that he'd do a spicy Jamaican jerk chicken. The more we talked, the more it expanded. Even neighbors who typically stuck to mild cooking wanted in just to show solidarity. One older couple said they'd bring kimchi from the local Korean market, proclaiming, "We love that stuff. And if Karen calls it smelly, well, tough luck." We set the date for 2 weeks from now, giving everyone time to gather ingredients. Then came the crucial step, inviting the HOA board, Karen included. If we framed it as a friendly, educational gathering to celebrate cultural diversity, we hoped to lure them in. Mark, the board president, seemed open-minded enough. Maybe if they tasted the food themselves, they'd see how petty it was to label it nuisance cooking. We designed a simple flyer titled, Polwood Gardens, Multicultural Cuisine Night. Join us for a celebration of flavors from around the world. Sample dishes lovingly prepared by your neighbors. All are welcome, including our HOA board members. Saturday, 6 p.m., unit #2B, hosted by my name. I printed copies and posted them on the community bulletin boards and slid some under each board member's door. The text was polite and inviting, but there was a subtle undertone. We wanted them to face the diversity they were labeling too pungent. As word spread about the event, the building was abuzz with excitement. People chatted in the hallways about what they might bring or how they'd like to see Karen's reaction. Some joked that we should pump the smell of simmering curry through the ventilation, but we decided that might be too antagonistic. The point was to share, not to fight with pranks. We wanted the board to see the genuine positivity of these foods. Meanwhile, Karen maintained a low profile. She sent out an email stating that the pungent foods policy discussion was still pending and that residents should mind strong odors in the interim. Another email from Mark said that the board appreciated the invite to our cooking event and would try to attend. He didn't speak on Karen's behalf, though. Whether she would dare show up remained a question. That week, I cleaned my apartment from top to bottom, rearranging furniture to create a buffet line and an open area for mingling. I set up extra folding chairs in the living room, stowed away fragile decorations to make space for large pots and serving dishes. The building's communal kitchen was small, so each participant planned to do most of their cooking at home, then bring the final dish to my place to keep warm in slow cookers or on portable burners. As the day approached, I grew both nervous and excited. We were expecting at least 20 participants. My unit wasn't huge, but I figured a cozy crowd would be fine. I prayed that no one would get in trouble for a fire hazard or overcapacity rule. Knowing Karen, she might try to sabotage us. But we'd done everything above board. No open flames except on the stove, which was perfectly legal, and we'd keep the windows open for ventilation. We had every right to host a private gathering, and the rest of the neighbors were eagerly awaiting it. At 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, the aromas in my apartment began to mingle into an incredible tapestry of scents. Pooja arrived first, carrying a large pot of chana masala that filled the air with the fragrance of ginger, garlic, onions, and spices. Next came Chi with containers of faux broth, which she poured into a big slow cooker, tossing in star anise, cloves, and cinnamon. The smell was both sweet and savory, undeniably distinct. Marisol brought a hearty mole poblano, rich with chocolate and chili peppers, along with homemade tortillas. Sam placed a tray of jerk chicken wings in my oven to keep them warm, the marinades Scotch bonnet peppers wafting an addictive spiciness. Others added dishes from all corners of the world, kimchi Jamaican rice and peas, Thai curry, even pungent cheese plates from French neighbor. My small living area soon felt like an aromatic festival. By 6 p.m., a steady stream of neighbors filled the space. They marveled at the variety, snapping photos, chatting excitedly as they lined up to taste each dish. I'd labeled each pot or platter with a small card indicating the name of the dish and its origin. People moved around, sampling, exclaiming how delicious everything was. Even a few folks who typically stuck to bland meals tried the spicier items, discovering new favorites. The atmosphere crackled with camaraderie. No negativity, no talk of offensive smells. Just genuine enjoyment of good food. Somewhere in the crowd, I spotted Mark, the HOA president, nibbling on a samosa that Pooja had provided. He looked impressed. "This is wonderful," he told me with a grin. "I had no idea we had so many talented cooks here. The variety is wow." I beamed, relieved that at least one board member was receptive. The real question, though, was whether Karen would appear. If she came, would she scold us for fumigating the halls? Or would she try the food? As if on cue, a hush fell near the doorway at about 6:20 p.m. Karen stood there, arms folded, face blank. She was accompanied by another board member, who looked slightly embarrassed. The pungent melange of odors must have hit her full force. Her nose wrinkled, though she tried to mask it. For a second, no one knew what to say. Then Sam called out brightly, "Welcome. Glad you could join us. Come taste something new." The tension cracked, replaced by an uneasy swirl of curiosity and dread. Karen stepped inside, scanning the tables as if searching for violations. For several minutes, Karen lingered at the fringes, not touching any of the dishes. The neighbors, mindful of her crusade, gave her polite but cautious smiles. Some pointedly asked if she'd like to try a sample of curry or pho. She declined with a stiff shake of her head, mumbling something about just observing. Meanwhile, Mark was openly enjoying plate after plate, praising each cook. This gave us confidence. If the HOA president saw no issue with the strong smells, that undermined Karen's entire argument. Finally, Pooja approached Karen, offering a small bowl of chana masala. "I just made this fresh. Would you like to taste some? It's vegetarian and not overly spicy." A bold move, since Karen had singled out Indian curry in her notice. For a moment, Karen hesitated, her face betraying a swirl of emotions. Pride, uncertainty, perhaps a pang of guilt. Under the expectant stares of those around, she exhaled. "All right," she said curtly, taking the bowl. I held my breath. She raised a spoonful to her lips and gingerly tried it. Silence fell. I expected her to sputter or recoil. But, ironically, chana masala can be quite mild if you tone down the chili, focusing on aromatic spices. She swallowed. A flicker of something crossed her face, maybe surprised that it wasn't some terrifying assault on her palate. "It's interesting," Karen managed. Not exactly a compliment, but not the condemnation we feared. Pooja smiled softly. "It's one of my family's staple dishes. I'm happy you're trying it." Karen gave a slight nod, as though struggling to maintain an air of authority. She placed the bowl aside, thanked Pooja in a neutral tone, and drifted away. I wondered if we made progress. Was she about to relent, or would she double down, claiming the air was unbearable? Moments later, she cornered me near the buffet line. "This is quite the turnout," she commented, gesturing at the crowd. "Is this how you plan to handle the aroma problem, by doubling down on these strong foods?" I swallowed, choosing my words carefully. "We're showing that these are not problems, Karen. They're cherished cuisines from our neighbors' backgrounds. Everyone is happy, enjoying the variety. The smell is part of the experience, pleasant, not offensive." She pursed her lips. "We'll see if the hallways reek for days. That would confirm it's a nuisance." I took a calming breath. "Karen, what if the real nuisance is trying to police what people cook at home? Food is a form of culture, identity. Should we ban that?" She bristled. "Don't twist this into a cultural dispute. This is about courtesy. If a smell lingers and bothers others, it's a problem, no matter the origin. We have a right to a clean environment." Before I could respond, Mark approached, overhearing her last statement. He patted Karen's shoulder. Karen, let's keep an open mind, yes? Look around. Everyone's respectful. This is a model community gathering, if you ask me. He gave me a friendly nod, then guided Karen away, politely changing the subject. I exhaled in relief. The confrontation ended without drama, but her stance remained stubborn. Still, seeing her grudgingly accept a spoonful of curry was a small victory in my book. Despite Karen's sour attitude, the rest of the event was a triumph. Neighbors mingled across cultural lines, discovering new tastes. People complimented one another's dishes, swapping cooking tips and exchanging stories about grandparents or hometowns. She explained how her family in Vietnam made pho from scratch, simmering bones for hours. Sam recounted how jerk seasoning represented a piece of his Jamaican heritage. The Singh showed folks how to eat chana masala with naan or rice. Even those who arrived skeptical left with full bellies and a newfound appreciation for the global tapestry within Polwood Gardens. An hour into the event, we took turns speaking briefly about what the dish we brought meant to us. It wasn't a planned speech, but a spontaneous wave of personal stories. Some neighbors grew emotional, recalling how a certain recipe connected them to their late parents or reminded them of childhood memories in a faraway country. The sweet and savory scents of the evening intertwined with these heartfelt anecdotes, forming a sense of communal pride. This was more than just a potluck. It was a testament to the power of food to bridge gaps and celebrate diversity. Mark and two other board members remained for much of the evening, sampling everything with gusto. They even asked for some recipes. After the last speech, Mark raised his paper plate in a toast-like gesture. I just want to say, he declared, this is one of the most wonderful gatherings I've seen here. We are blessed to have such cultural richness. It's an asset, not a nuisance. A roar of cheers erupted. I glanced at Karen, standing to the side, arms crossed. She appeared stone-faced, but I sensed an internal conflict. Her body language softened slightly. Maybe she realized how outnumbered she was in her quest to quell pungent foods. Maybe part of her recognized that the problem smells she'd complained about were, in fact, beloved traditions. Or maybe she was just strategizing her next move. Around 9 p.m., the crowd thinned as folks carried out leftover containers. I offered take-home portions to Mark and the other board members, who gratefully accepted. Karen politely declined, leaving quickly with barely a word. But the rest of us felt jubilant. The event ended on a hopeful note. Perhaps we had turned the tide against her ill-conceived plan. Word of the Multicultural Cuisine night spread through the building like wildfire. People posted photos and rave reviews on the local community forum. Comments poured in. That was amazing. We should do this monthly. I discovered I love jerk chicken. The buzz was decidedly pro-diversity, which put Karen in a tight spot. If she pushed forward with the pungent food ban, she'd face an even larger wave of backlash. Nevertheless, she tried to salvage her crusade. Another official notice went out, stating, "Reminder, the issue of strong-smelling foods will be on the agenda at our upcoming board meeting. Residents are encouraged to attend and provide input. Our priority remains preserving a comfortable living environment." The language was more measured than before, but the intent was clear. Karen still believed she could rally enough support to impose some limit on smelly cooking. So the building prepared for a second heated meeting. Meanwhile, Mark privately confided to me that he and other board members were leaning against any ban, especially after seeing the positivity of the potluck. But Karen is persistent, he warned, and she'll push every bylaw angle if she thinks she has a case about public nuisance or odors. We need residents to show up and speak out again. We organized a show of unity for the meeting, encouraging everyone who attended the potluck or supported cultural cooking to come. The Singhs, Chi, Marisol, Sam, and countless others planned to speak. Some older residents who rarely went to HOA meetings also promised to join, outraged that their heritage dishes could be banned. By the time the day arrived, the community room once again overflowed with people, tension and determination swirling in the air. Karen opened the discussion with a forced smile. We're here to address the ongoing concern about strong food odors. I acknowledge the positive aspects of cultural cooking, but we must also address the fact that certain aromas can linger, affecting neighbors. We've received new complaints. She paused, rummaging her papers. Yes, I have statement from individuals who say the hallway outside unit #3C smelled strongly for days. Pooja stood up, face flushed. That's our unit. We cook Indian meals daily, yes. But no one has approached us personally with concerns. In fact, we open windows, run fans, and keep the hallway door closed. I doubt the smell lingers for days. Where are these new complaints coming from? Karen waved a paper. They fear confrontation. Regardless, the board can't ignore them. Marisol took the microphone next, passionately describing how her abuela's adobo dish might fill the air briefly, but was no different than if someone baked fish or roasted garlic. Are we banning garlic next? Because that can be pungent. Or bacon. That's strong too. This is a slippery slope. Sam chimed in. Food is part of our identity. Jamaican jerk is a staple for me. If I can't cook that, do I have to stop being who I am? We can't let one person's complaints override the majority. Applause followed each testimony. Karen attempted to retort, citing respect for shared spaces, but the momentum was clearly against her. Mark read some letters of support from residents praising the potluck event. Another board member said, "Look, we do have solutions for ventilation, like better range hoods, or simply encouraging courtesy. But an outright ban on certain cuisines is excessive." Hearing the near-unanimous pushback, Karen's facade cracked. She tried to raise the specter of health codes or potential allergic reactions, but the audience wasn't buying it. Several asked, why not address actual health hazards like mold or pests instead of policing cooking aromas? The meeting stretched for 2 hours, with speaker after speaker urging the board to reject any ban. Finally, Mark moved to a vote. All those in favor of adopting Karen's proposed restrictions on strong-smelling foods. Silence. Not one board member raised a hand. Karen's eyes flashed. Mark continued, all opposed. 4 hands shot up, enough to defeat the measure. The crowd erupted in cheers. Karen sat fuming, forced to watch the proposal die. In the aftermath, the building breathed a collective sigh of relief. The threatened ban on strong-smelling dishes was officially off the table. Residents resumed cooking with their beloved spices, fish sauces, and aromatic ingredients without fear of penalty. The sense of unity forged by the potluck lingered. Neighbors who once barely knew each other now swapped recipes in the hall, teased about trying something new, or borrowed spices when they ran out mid-cooking. Karen, for her part, found herself isolated. Her misguided crusade had alienated many. She still had her official position, but the board membership no longer let her run amok with personal agendas. Mark quietly introduced a new rule requiring board proposals to receive majority pre-approval before distribution. That meant no more unilateral notices from Karen. She posted fewer and fewer updates, almost as if in retreat. Some rumored she was considering moving, having lost face. But that remained unconfirmed. The new atmosphere of acceptance overshadowed her negativity. As for me, I felt proud of how we'd transformed a potential fiasco into a celebration of diversity. The potluck idea had worked better than I ever dreamed. We proved to the entire community that pungent can be delicious, that cultural exchange can conquer ignorance. I kept in touch with the neighbors who joined in, inviting them over occasionally to share more dishes. Sam taught me how to make a jerk marinade from scratch. She offered to help me perfect a homemade pho. Pooja and Raj introduced me to more Indian recipes. Food had become our unifying language. A few weeks later, we decided to do a part 2 of the Multicultural Cuisine event, this time in the building's community lounge rather than just my apartment. Mark secured board approval to let us use the larger space for a weekend afternoon. We called it the Polwood Gardens International Food Fair, inviting anyone to bring a dish or just come eat. I half expected Karen to boycott the affair, but she actually showed up briefly, strolling through with a polite nod, declining to taste anything but offering no harsh words. Perhaps it was an olive branch. Perhaps she was just trying to save face. Either way, the gathering was a rousing success. By the end of that second event, we raised a small donation pool for a local food pantry. The synergy between tasting new dishes and supporting a charity felt perfect. As we cleaned up, Mark pulled me aside. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "You turned a negative situation into something that made us stronger as a community. The board owes you one." I laughed. "I'm just glad we can cook what we love without fear." We parted ways, satisfied that Pullwood Gardens had grown more inclusive, more open. Karen's ban had failed spectacularly, but ironically, it spurred neighbors to unite in ways we never had before. Now, on any given day, you might step into the hallway and catch a swirl of saffron, lemongrass, cinnamon, or chili drifting from different apartments. Some might call that pungent. We call it home. We call it the scent of cultural exchange, a smell that warms the heart as much as the stomach. And that, ultimately, is our happy ending. Karen's misguided attempt to squash strong-smelling foods backfired, revealing the rich tapestry of cultures within our building. By opening our doors and sharing our meals, we reminded everyone that what unites us is far greater and far more delicious than what divides us. The building emerged with a newfound appreciation for each other's heritage. In the end, we discovered that diversity in food wasn't a nuisance at all, but a cause for celebration.